Joining us now is Dan McClory, Managing Director and Head of China at Boustead Securities. Dan, good to have you here in studio with us.
Great to be on the show, Michelle.
So, Dan, the plan is for China to launch an oil futures contract on the Shanghai International Energy Exchange. What would it mean for China to have an oil futures market based in yuan?
Well, it's a very ambitious thought. It's a very ambitious potential plan. Clearly, as you point out, it would start to shift some of the balance of power in the direction of China. But there are all kinds of structural and just logistical impediments to it really happening. So I think it's a great pronouncement, but a lot of ground to cover.
A lot of ground to cover, but China does have the advantage of being the largest oil importer in the world, so it certainly has sway with regards to that. Right. What are some of these obstacles that China would have to overcome to make this happen?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's the currency. So the yuan, despite the fact that it's in the global basket right now as a reserve currency, is not freely convertible.
Because it's pegged to the dollar.
It's pegged to the dollar. And every morning it's set by the government in Beijing. And so the flow of liquidity in currencies is vitally important. So if you have a currency that doesn't freely float, it would make it very difficult to get behind this effort. So I think that's one big problem.
But there is the notion that some countries would like to see the dollar dethroned to sort of level the playing field, if you will. Do you see OPEC supporting this, or the majority of the countries in OPEC supporting this? How do you see Russia, for example, viewing a yuan-denominated oil futures market?
Yeah, I think those are all three different constituencies. So Russia, as we know, is kind of the trading partner of last resort with China. Okay, their options are severely limited. So they would like nothing better than to see this happen, because it would allow them to have a backup plan. It would allow them to not be so vulnerable to sanctions, and embargoes and things that could happen. So I think Russia's definitely on board. OPEC, I think, is going to study it very closely. What would be the main concern? I think the main concern is, apart from the lack of convertibility, that are you really going to have a freely functioning and liquid market? And I think that's very much up in the air.
Now, Saudi Arabia, I would imagine, would be critical to this plan.
Yes.
How would this fit in, if it were to happen? How would this fit in with the Saudi Arabia's plans to diversify away from its oil economy? Yeah. With this, because China is a big playing partner in that effort.
Right. That's a really great point, Michelle. So as we know, Saudi Arabia is embarking on what's going to be the world's largest IPO, right? $1 trillion listing of Aramco.
Right.
Okay. And they're going to sell something like 5% of it for $100 billion. That's the plan from Prince Mo. So they have embarked already in a number of initiatives with China, as you point out, being the largest importer. And one of them is they're planning on helping to build some refineries in China. The other is the two of the three big Chinese state-owned oil companies, PetroChina and Sinopec, excuse me, have talked about putting in their own $100 billion into the Saudi Aramco IPO. And this would be, you know, a very interesting development. Maybe they would not have to go do the IPO. Maybe they would have $200 billion instead. So I think there's some good interplay and some good interactivity going on between the two nations. I think ultimately, in this diversification that you point out, it helps Saudi Arabia to have another market potentially for oil. And
as you say, this is all goes back to the currency, the yuan, and the fact that it's still pegged to the dollar. But China has really been making a big push to make the yuan a global reserve currency, to perhaps overtake the dollar. You have the dollar is ranked first, then euros, and the yuan is in third place.
Right.
What would need to happen for that ambition to come through for China, to have the yuan as the number one?
Convertibility. It is not freely convertible. And until that occurs, you will not have global participation in the yuan. You'll have it in a controlled and almost forced way, like with Russia, for example, or perhaps through this exchange, but it's not going to be a freely functioning market. So that's got to take place. And in general, that's related to a lack of transparency, and there's a lot of opacity in how China determines currencies. There could be interventions, there could be suspensions. So it's just not predictable enough to be able to have the world start building a market around the yuan.
And investors hate uncertainty.
They absolutely do.
Dan, very quickly, want to get your thoughts on today's jobs number. U.S. economy going strong.
Absolutely. You know, the growth was greater than anticipated, you know, coming back from the natural disasters that occurred in October and September. And I think what we're seeing, though, is a lack of a recovery in wage growth. If there's any gray lining to that silver cloud, it's got to be that. So we still need to see some wage growth. I mean, very strong indicators for the economy. I think it's really doing well. Months and months and months of expansion. But
and that would come with competition. What would finally get wage growth up?
I think you're right. I think wage growth is going to come by the return of higher value jobs. We've seen manufacturing jobs. That was almost one of the largest sectors. I think 156,000 manufacturing jobs have been added in the last year, for example. So we'll see some of those jobs that are starting to come back, high value jobs. A lot of the frictionally unemployed, and that would be another critique of the jobs report, is that a number of job seekers dropped out of the market. Were they aging baby boomers that retired? What happened here? But I think in general, a very positive report.
All right, so we'll end it on a positive note. Thank you so much. Dan McClory, Managing Director at Boustead Securities. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Michelle.
Well.